There is a new interview with director Christopher Nolan for The Odyssey, thanks to a newly published article by Time magazine. The director responds to some concerns surrounding his film, discusses some of the changes he's making, talks a bit more about how he and his team filmed his adaptation, and shared some new casting news. So in this video, I'm going to be discussing the interview and all of the new details shared, breaking down the latest info from the film. Before I get into it though, if you want to keep up to date on any of my content surrounding Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey, then don't forget to support this upload by giving it a like rating, subscribing to the channel, and turning on your notifications. But without further ado, let's discuss the new Christopher Nolan interview and all the new details for The Odyssey. So Christopher Nolan's new Time magazine interview paints a clear picture of a filmmaker pushing himself into the most ambitious chapter of his career, reinforcing just how personal and long gestating working on The Odyssey has been for him. Nolan talks about carrying ideas for this film for more than 20 years, an idea he originally conceived back when he was nearly hired to direct Troy. What comes through strongly in this interview is how Nolan frames The Odyssey as both spectacle and psychological drama. Nolan and actor Matt Damon emphasise that while the film features Cyclops and sea monsters and is shot with minimal CGI and full IMAX immersion, the heart of the story is Odysseus' internal struggle. The Time article further adds that they believe The Odyssey is a character study. They say that it would have been enough to strap Matt Damon's Odysseus to a real ship's mast and sell him past sirens, but they say that in Nolan's version, Damon has to perform an existential crisis as those sirens psychoanalyze him through song. So that's just one interesting hint at how Christopher Nolan is bringing his creative touch to a mythical sequence like the sirens. Matt Damon also said in the article that the script was very specific in what Nolan was doing. He said that he's very faithful to Homer because that's not somebody you rewrite, but thematically, what Nolan looked at was really interesting. The interview further presents Nolan as a director who's fully aware of the scale and risk of what he's attempting, yet he feels completely energized by it. Throughout the interview, Time also shared a few new images from the film, including one of Odysseus and his men, another behind-the-scenes image of Christopher Nolan setting up a shot with the decapitated statue of Athena during the sacking of Troy, and then another filming shot with the director. But getting more into Nolan's interview, it did start to go into his responses to certain concerns in the article and went more into his adaptation choices. Time said in regards to the adaptation changes that Argos, Odysseus' loyal dog, has been promoted from a cameo to a bit player. They also said that Odysseus and his son Telemachus, burdened by the legend of a father he doesn't remember, are given more time together on screen. They also said that Circe, an archetype in Homer's version, gets a humanizing update thanks to Samantha Morton's unsettling yet sympathetic performance. And that's of course a big new piece of casting news. And then the reunion between Odysseus' fellow king Menelaus and his wife Helen has always felt too neatly resolved in the poem. So Nolan has complicated it, as Lupita Nyong'o will also play Helen's sister Clytemnestra, whose marriage to Menelaus' brother Agamemnon is acrimonious. When it comes to the very centre of the film though, what compels Odysseus and compels audiences to root for him is his love for his wife. The article says that Anne Hathaway was pleasantly surprised when she read Nolan's script and saw that the Queen doesn't just sit around and weep. She said that there's this impression of Penelope that she's kind of a picture of modesty, but she's the picture of patience. And I said, Chris, if I'm not mistaken, you've written someone who is full of fury, and you seem to be implying that she's actually Odysseus' equal. So this Penelope matches her husband not just in intellect but in passion. I found her to be this volcano of a human that was always simmering, and it was really fun when she finally exploded. The director then began to speak about the level of research that went into the production from all departments, especially considering their Bronze Age knowledge is based on very fragmentary archaeological records. When the trailer dropped, some complained about Agamemnon's armor being dark, shiny, and even reminiscent of Nolan's batsuit. But what struck some as fantastical, Nolan defends as feasible. He says there are Mycenaean daggers that are blackened bronze. The theory is that they probably could have had blackened bronze in those days. You take bronze, you add more gold and silver to it, and then use sulfur. With Agamemnon, our costume designer is trying to communicate how elevated he is relative to everyone else. You do that through materials that would be very expensive. Moving on, Nolan also offers equally thorough explanations for other production choices, from the boats to the weapons, all of which draw on both the Bronze Age and Homer's era hundreds of years later. He says the oldest depictions of Homeric characters tend to be depicted in the manner of people living in Homer's time, roughly 400 to 500 years after the collapse of the late Bronze Age. So there's a pretty strong case there for portraying things that way, because that's the way the first audience received the story. In 2014, he told Time magazine what it took to get Interstellar's physics right, and he apparently brought a similar ethos to the Odyssey. He said, for Interstellar, you're looking at what is the best speculation of the future, and then when you're looking at the ancient past, it's actually the same thing. What is the best speculation, and how can I use that to create a world on screen? Of course, he knows this approach won't satisfy every classicist, and he also says hopefully they'll enjoy the film even if they don't agree on everything. He said that they had a lot of scientists complain about Interstellar, but you just don't want people to think that you took it on frivolously. So it appears that there is a lot of thought and care going into these designs, and this is very much the contrary to what some people are pushing online regarding the film. The director even went on to talk about his take on the Trojan horse, saying if the horse were sinking into the sand and about to be swept away by the tide, the Trojans would never believe there could be anyone in there. They would be rescuing this thing from the waves and dragging it into the city as a prize. It wouldn't be on wheels like a roller skate. On top of this, Nolan also discussed putting rapper Travis Scott in the film as a bard, saying, "I cast him because I wanted to nod towards the idea that this story had been handed down as oral poetry, which is analogous to rap." And he bookended this discussion on the criticism, saying, "If you're paying too much attention to what people are pointing out in your work, you'd be paralysed." And to be honest, I think he's completely right. He's bringing both a balance of faithfulness and then his take on the material, and with it being a large-scale cinematic adaptation of the Odyssey, I think that is the right approach. There are plenty of documentaries out there, even other adaptations across multiple mediums that cover the Odyssey differently, and this is his take in large-scale fashion. On top of addressing some of the criticism, the director and others discussed the filming process and how they approached certain aspects of the filmmaking. It said in the article that a helicopter was reportedly needed to transport Christopher Nolan's 400-pound IMAX camera through steep mountain locations during the filming. The production also nearly faced disaster after Scottish custom agents nearly opened IMAX film cans, potentially exposing the unused film. And the article also noted that Christopher Nolan doesn't quite understand why he has a reputation for disliking visual effects. He says, "I've developed a reputation for not liking visual effects, but you know, my films have won 3 Oscars for VFX. I know a lot about it and I'm really fascinated by it. But I like to make films with a very grounded tone. It's why the ship carrying Odysseus and his crew had to be genuinely seaworthy, not only to withstand the chop of the Mediterranean in early spring, but also to sail from Morocco to Greece to Italy as production moved location. It's why cinematographer Hoyte van Hoytema rigged hundreds of portable LEDs to mimic the precise colour temperature of firelight so Nolan could shoot in any direction during the midnight raid of Troy. And it's why actor Bill Irwin, who voiced and puppeteered Tars in Interstellar, was hired to guide the performance of the mythical Cyclops Polyphemus. Nolan further considered casting actors to play gods throwing thunderbolts from Mount Olympus, but settled on something more primal. In a big reveal, he said, "I became more interested in the idea that to people in that period, evidence of gods was everywhere. In Bronze Age Greek, thunder, rain, and the sun rising didn't have scientific explanations, they represented the will of the immortals. The wonderful thing about cinema, and IMAX in particular, is that you can take an audience to a place of immersion, feeling close to events like storms, turbulent seas, and high winds. You want the audience to be on the boat with them, fearing the ocean, fearing the wrath of Poseidon, the way the characters do. That to me is so much more powerful than any individual image you can have of a god." I think this is a really fascinating take from Nolan, and I did say in mentioning that interview he did with Stephen Colbert a couple of weeks back that it seems like this was the route he was going in. Essentially, he's presenting the gods through the elements and the way the characters respond to things around them. To me, this genuinely feels like the right approach for a Christopher Nolan take on the gods in the Odyssey, and I actually think it makes that aspect more unsettling in a good way. Of course, we'll have to see how that actually works on screen because it might completely fall flat, but I must admit I'm intrigued about what I'm hearing from him about this element. And the final thing that was mentioned in regards to the filmmaking in this Time interview was the approach of Ludwig Göransson to the film's score. The Time article says, "In the corner of Göransson's studio sits a lyre nearly the size of a grown man, one room over from a ping pong table that's at the push of a button disappears into the floor." For Göransson and Nolan, the ancient and the modern are not so far apart, and even the string instrument plays a surprising role. The composer added, "Chris had the idea of the sound of the lyre being the pluck of Odysseus's bow." Nolan apparently instructed Göransson not to use an orchestra for the Odyssey score, saying it's not like the orchestra existed back then. Of course, Nolan and his composers have always approached the score for his films in many unique ways, so this definitely seems like it's going to be that again, and an approach that is being faithful to the period as well. But they were all the main details that were revealed in the new interview with Christopher Nolan for The Odyssey. What do you guys think towards the new details from the film, and based on everything you've heard, does it get you any more excited for the film? Let me know down below in the comments section. For much more videos and breakdowns, then subscribe to the channel and turn on your notifications. Also, if you enjoyed this video, remember to leave a like rating and follow me on social media via the links in the description. But anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed it. I've been Cortex, and as always, make some noise.